All right, I think we're getting close to ready to start. If you want to go ahead and admit everybody and start the meeting recording. Greetings and welcome everyone to this meeting of the State Water Resources Control Board's second statewide agricultural expert panel on January 7th, 2026. My name is Sam McGill. I've been assisting the Water Board with facilitation of the expert panel for some months now. We're making a lot of really wonderful progress and excited to jump into our agenda today. Before we do, I'd like to run through a few very brief Zoom instructions. I think everyone's largely familiar with them at this point. In just a moment, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michael Soler, to run through these instructions in Spanish as well. If you require interpretation assistance, you can navigate to the language channels by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to listen in English, please click on English. If you would like to click on Spanish, please click on Spanish. One note, if you are planning on listening in Spanish, please click mute original audio. And for any technical assistance throughout the meeting today, you can email dwq-ilrp@waterboards.ca.gov. Let me go ahead and turn it now over to Michael Soler to run through the instructions in Spanish.
Muy buenas tardes. Por favor, note que tenemos servicios de interpretación ofrecidos hoy día para la sesión. Para escuchar el programa en español, por favor seleccione el icono del globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice interpretación. Luego seleccione su idioma Spanish o español y de ahí podrá escuchar todo el programa en español. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Sam.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Michael. And thank you as well to Sol Lopez, our other Spanish language interpreter, for your assistance today. All right, before we run through the meeting agenda, I'd like to turn it over first to Karen Mogus from the State Water Resources Control Board for opening remarks, and then over to the expert panel chair, Dr. Daniel Geisler. Karen.
I'll keep my remarks brief. I know there's a lot to get through. Just wanted to say Happy New Year to everyone. Glad to see you all again, and really wanted to thank the panel for extending the time for this project and extending your work on it so that we can get the best product that we can. And I really appreciate your diligent work on this. As you know, there's a lot of attention being paid to the work and to your recommendations, and I really appreciate all that you have done and are continuing to do to get us to where we need to be. And with that, I'll just end and look forward to hearing the discussion today and to getting your recommendations later this month, early February. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. Chair Geisler, any opening remarks you'd like to provide?
I just wanted to say good afternoon and Happy New Year, everybody, and thanks for joining us today.
Okay.
Back to you. Sam, you're mute.
Oh my goodness. I do a million of these and still make that mistake. Thank you, Daniel. So this agenda should look fairly familiar to people at this point. Our goal here is really to facilitate the expert panel's deliberations, specifically around the panel charge questions that have been posted to the State Water Board website for some time. In just a moment, we'll have our panel members introduce themselves. After that, really the primary focus and the bulk of the discussion today is a continued panel discussion of draft documents, in particular, the responses to questions and the complete draft of the document that has started to be developed over the last couple of weeks. As we previously done, we will also have brief presentations from a couple of different groups that were invited by the expert panel members on really specific issues. Today, we're joined by a wonderful team from UC Agriculture and Natural Resources to discuss small and diversified farms, as well as Dr. Joji Muramoto, who will be speaking about high carbon amendments and the impact or their connection to the panel's questions as well. Around 5:40 or so, we will break for public comment, and we plan to adjourn at 6. Once we get to that public comment session, I'll run through the instructions on how to participate if you would like to provide comment at that time. But with that, why don't we do a quick round of introductions of your expert panel members. I'll go ahead and call out your name, and if you could just introduce yourself, that would be wonderful. Starting at the top of my list, let's go with Hannah Waterhouse.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Waterhouse. I'm an assistant professor at University of California, Santa Cruz.
Thanks, Hannah. Ali Montazar.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ali Montazar. I am Irrigation and Water Management Advisor in Southern California with UC Cooperative Extension.
Thanks, Ali. Richard Smith.
Hi everyone, Richard Smith, retired vegetable crop farm advisor in Monterey County.
Thanks, Richard. Michael Kahn.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm a farm advisor, specialized in irrigation and water resource management, and based in Monterey County.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. Ruth Dahlquist Willard.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Ruth Dahlquist Willard. I'm the interim director of UC SWRCB, the UC Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program at UC A&R.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ruth. All right. Just scrolling through our list, I believe that that's all of our panel members who are joining us here today. Many thanks for your continued participation in this effort. Did I miss anybody before we jump into the agenda? Okay. Let's go ahead and get into it then. So as I mentioned, really the primary purpose of today's discussion is continued deliberation around a series of draft documents, starting with a review of the draft responses to panel questions 9 and 7, as well as a discussion, as I mentioned at the outset, of the draft panel report and all other questions as time allows. So we do anticipate a very full discussion today. Daniel, if there are any documents you'd like me to display up on the screen, I can certainly do that. But otherwise, I know you had mentioned you wanted to start with the draft response to question 9. So I'll hand it back over to you.
Great. Yes, that's correct. So we haven't discussed question 9 as a team yet, so we should start with that. And then we don't have a clean version of question 7D. I think we will follow with that, and then depending on time, we can talk about the first draft of a final report. And Ali, you and Thomas, you drafted the response to question 9. Could you lead the discussion?
Sure.
About that question?
So would you like me to share my screen, or you do it?
If you have it on your the document open, yes, then you can share.
Can you see it?
Now, yes.
Okay. Okay. So would you like me to start?
Yes, please.
Sure. Well, thank you, Daniel. Well, I would like to start with my special thanks to Water Control Board for adding this question and the opportunity to address by the panel. I think based on the observation we all have, we know there are some growers and regions that they think the nitrogen reporting of irrigated lands regulatory program is an additional or sometimes even unnecessary regulatory burden for them, specifically for some crops and some regions. And for the fairness, I think is good opportunity to at least we discuss some of the issues and concerns and look at if there is solid science-based information and data and observation for the exemption or different approaches and alternative approaches for the program. I think that's a fair opportunity, and thanks to Water Control Board for this question. As you mentioned, Daniel, we drafted this. We didn't clean our response, and the reason for that was because we never officially discussed the question, so we tried to leave some materials there as a background or concept for better understanding. So that's why we didn't clean. And thank you very much to you specifically for the comments you added. I think they are all valid comments, and we can adopt them for the revision. So with that introduction, as you can see here in the question 9, I think specifically the question 9 referred to the Central Coast Ag Water Quality Order, and specifically about the exemption currently the program there has. So the program consider exemption about rice crop because growers apply a very minimum or no nitrogen to rice. They have some document for no runoff, sediment erosion, and those kind of issues. So there is exemption for rice. We see exemption for diversified disadvantaged growers who don't operate more than 45 acres. Other growers who don't operate more than 20 acres. And those exemptions are there. So we took that as a good understanding. So what we should look here and what will be or recommendation for the exemption. So we thought if we want to go with some exemption, perhaps we should think about specific crops or specific regions, and the exemption will be about a crop or region or specific management and those kind of operation and things. So with that in mind, the first thing we came up is wine grape vineyard. So in the very early meetings, we heard about how growers do manage wine grape, the needs of nitrogen application. Most of irrigation system already adopted drip irrigation. So it's not a high nitrogen consumer. I think very efficient water and nitrogen, nitrogen efficient crop. So the practices growers do for wine grape vineyard, it seems very spoon feeding management. And we think with that, so wine grape should have a very minimum effect of groundwater. So that was the first crop based on what we learned from the presentation and some documents about wine grape. So the second crop we came up is alfalfa. So at least I'm good with alfalfa because I have 15 years of experience, work experience in alfalfa. So we have, I think, a very solid data set and well-known information about alfalfa. Alfalfa is a long-stand established crop. We have it in the past about 1 million acre in California. Now we have about 500,000 acres. So it's a big crop still. So it's very well recognized as a high nitrogen efficient crop. And it has a biological nitrogen fixation in the root. And that's why our growers do not apply nitrogen except at the first year for establishment. or apply just a minimum amount of application. If you ask me what that minimum looks like, I can tell you because I have enough experience on that. So from 0 to a little bit more less than 100 pounds per acre. So that's the application range for this crop. And mostly, as I mentioned, at the first year during the establishment, because the roots are not very well developed. But after that, after 6 months, the root goes, beyond 2 feet. And since then, so they are very active to provide, to supply their nitrogen needs. So I work on alfalfa, not just in the desert, from Tule Lake, Scott Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and currently Imperial Valley. So the harvest we have and the production of this crop from north, from Tule Lake, Scott Valley to here, is quite different. We have 3 cuts in Tule Lake, Scott Valley, 9 to 10 cuts in Imperial Valley, about 6 cuts in Sacramento, and about 7 to 8 cuts in San Joaquin Valley. So the average of yield, it means this is, the reason I mentioned this, because so we cannot, say there is a big difference of these crops, the talk we are discussing here between north and south. So if we eliminate Tule Lake, which doesn't have a high acreage, just focus on the Central Valley and Imperial Valley. So the average of yield should be about 7 to 10 ton per acre, the average. So it means that if the crop coefficient for this crop is about the same, we should not consider a huge differences of the nitrogen removal across the state. So estimation of the removal in the desert, this is the very average, about 500 pound per acre to about 700 pound per acre. I think this is very important because we remove that high and we apply less than 100. If you go across 4 or 5 years stand, I think the average application over 5 years stand of alfalfa is even less than 100, or some growers, as I mentioned, they don't apply. We do not, I'm producing alfalfa for my research over the last 12 years. We never applied nitrogen after the first 6 months. We apply just phosphorus and potassium and pesticide, water, and we harvest it. And this is almost the practice our growers also doing. So a minimum nitrogen application, a high removal. I think that's the document we have for alfalfa. So the other crop was Thomas' observation. He mentioned about pasture system. But we came up, if we want to go with any exemption for pasture, we should focus on clover-based pasture, because some of the clover species, they are acting exactly like alfalfa. So they are very nitrogen efficient. Growers apply just a little, sometimes no. And it has a nitrogen fixation capability. So which means the clover-based pasture system could meet that nitrogen removal threshold we are talking about. I would like to mention one other things for alfalfa, which includes for clover-based. When we talk about, for example, 500, 600 removal and less than 100 applied, even if with the water quality of different part of the state, and the nitrogen comes from irrigation water, is still A-R stand below 50 pound per acre is always negative, the number, minus 200 pound per acre. Stand around that for alfalfa, at least for the desert region. which we do not have, any contribution from Colorado River water nitrogen. So we recommend also clover-based pasture, the same way we act for alfalfa. So another area we think we should think about, and we can, perhaps have some recommendation for exemption, is a desert region. So I put together a statement for the desert region. So desert is a very unique region. So we have 3 productive valleys in the region, but exactly their hydrology is different. But the conclusion about nitrogen management is still, they are the same, even though the hydrology of those 3, Imperial Valley, Coachella Valley, and Palo Verde are different. So in Imperial Valley, we do not have groundwater resources. Not Imperial Irrigation District, not our farmers believe the groundwater is usable for portable or irrigation or for municipal. So Colorado River is the sole water source for the entire region, specifically for Imperial Valley. So no groundwater. We do not even have in this region one observation wells to take some samples and look at what the quality of water in groundwater is. This is one of the issues we have in Imperial Valley. So it means if there is no groundwater, so the nitrogen how possibly affect groundwater and portable water. So there is no communication basically in drinking water quality and agricultural practices and application rates of our growers in Imperial Valley, very clear. When it goes to Palo Verde is very interesting. In Imperial, the drainage water goes to the Salton Sea. So it means we should address that water quality about Salton Sea. But when it goes to Palo Verde, the tailwater of the fields return to the Colorado River water. So it means there is no drainage water or sink in Palo Verde. So 60-65% of their lands are just on alfalfa with no contribution of the nitrogen issues. They have some cotton, very low acreage of vegetables. So it means they believe, all the information and the data the water district has and monitoring, there is no evidence to show even any contribution from the tailwater to Colorado River water nitrogen contamination. So very, very unique. So when it goes to Coachella, is very specific. Coachella has some wells, but the wells we have in Coachella mostly are for the golf course irrigation, not for irrigation applications and use. So what we learned from this is also very well developed information by USGS. Various years, it shows Coachella Valley has a very unique hydrogeology. So the information are available shows there is so the municipal water, groundwater comes from the deeper aquifer. And that deeper aquifer protected by a very thick, low permeability clay layer, which means the groundwater for municipal water, is separately from the top layer, which comes from the agriculture drainage water. And the drainage water goes again to the Salton Sea. So no communication between the agricultural drainage and groundwater wells we have in Coachella, and is very well documented by USGS. So based on that, I think we should decide here. So how we should address, if there is no groundwater contamination comes from ag, so we should go with perhaps with alternative approaches for groundwater, for regulatory program. But as I mentioned, Salton Sea here is another story. So the Salton Sea is a terminal receiving surface water body for ag and municipal discharge in the region. It's a drain sink of the region. Its salinity is twice as saline as ocean water. Not usable for any irrigation and municipal use. It's formally listed as impaired water body, documented. So it means, what we take care of about Salton Sea is not about human health. It's about, habitat and ecological benefit. Which means, a general waste discharge requirement should be sufficient for monitoring. This is, if you look at Salton, around Salton Sea and in Imperial Valley, in Coachella Valley, there is a very well-developed monitoring station developed by Imperial Valley Irrigation District and Coachella Valley Water District. Imperial has more than 15 monitoring stations in the valley, and they monitor regularly every 15 days. The water quality goes to the Salton Sea. So it means general waste discharge requirement can be a good monitoring approach for the Salton Sea. Perhaps nitrogen report doesn't provide any additional water quality protection for the Salton Sea, but we should discuss. I think I stop here, open it, Daniel, to discussion. That was, what we think. I think Richard Smith can talk about organic growing, because that comment comes from Richard. We can discuss that later, I think. So
very much, Ali. And I see Thomas has joined the group. Do you have anything to add, Thomas? And welcome.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I'm running late. I had some technical issues. Yes. Ali, I'm wondering whether what you're pointing out is really important and highly relevant. I imagine this is beyond our authority, insights, knowledge of policy processes to address this situation. I think there's issues of potentially de-designating groundwater, which is a process by itself, very, very involved process. That would be one way to go about this. Another way to go about this would be for that entire region to go through a process, I imagine, similar to what the Rice Coalition has done, where they go through the full, through a full assessment of their groundwater resources, their crops, their nitrogen cycle, and actually show why, in the case of the rice, they showed why they're not impacting groundwater quality and developed an alternative compliance program. I'm not familiar with the details of this, but that footnote 33 clearly kind of points out that this question 9 is about that what the Rice Coalition did sets a path for other, potential either commodities. And in this case, it might be just the alfalfa as a commodity, or it may be the entire region to say, okay, we're going to go down this path. And I don't feel that we have, or I have the insights into those processes to make any specific recommendations. But I think what you're saying would be worth to mention here and include here, and suggest that this particular region, together with their regional water board, thinks about potentially going down the road that the Rice Coalition has gone. And I think this goes for many of the other exceptions that we're proposing here. We can't really be specific. I don't feel that we have enough information to say there's other exceptions or alternative methods for compliance than the ones that are proposed, because of the complex policy and policy protocols to go down that path. just in general, I think it seems that there are some obvious places and some obvious crops that would probably benefit from going down this path. And I think in the December 17th listening session, we also heard the case made for the nurseries and floral industry. They could potentially go down that road. We haven't included them here in this particular question yet, but that might be another one that could potentially look at that. Thank you.
So do you have any suggestion how we should address in the recommendation these things, Thomas?
What do you mean?
So how we should, go with the exemption specifically for the crops and for the regions, or should not recommend any exemption, or?
I don't feel comfortable making any recommendation for exemptions, but I think we can point out these crops or industries or regions that we feel seem to be candidates to go down the path that has been proposed or has been essentially set by the Rice Coalition.
Thank you.
Or then, and then I assume that from that comes from that path. I assume the path doesn't say the compliance program is exactly like the Rice compliance program. The path is, here's where we are, here's what we're seeing, and here's an appropriate way to do compliance, which is lower burden than the regular path. But what that path is would be very, very individual to each of these exemption programs.
Thank you. Makes sense. I think Hannah.
Sally, for the your response to this question, and Thomas as well. And I agree with Thomas. And I also wanted to point out that I can't remember, I think it was in question 1, we did discuss if after, 3, I can't remember if it was 3 or 5 years of reporting, if there were growers who had who were in compliance and meeting those targets or limits, that they would have a reduced reporting burden as kind of an incentive. And so maybe that kind of fits. I'm not sure if that's some kind of combination of that with saying, with highlighting these specific situations and saying there should be an alternative compliance pathway, or at least a method by which they're demonstrating that they do not have an impact like the Rice folks. So maybe kind of a combination of those.
Thank you. Ruth.
I just wanted to point out that exemptions are kind of a lot more, I guess, concerning than alternate reporting. So I understand that exemptions should require a very high bar for showing that nitrate leaching is really not happening. But I think that alternate reporting is a different tool that should be explored, not only to reduce regulatory burden on growers, but to tailor requirements to be meaningful to the cropping systems. Because that is actually what makes compliance, I guess, socialized, or not sure what the right word is, but more accepted and institutionalized over time, is when it really makes sense for the system that you're using. And California has over 400 specialty crops. We have so many different diverse climates and regions and cropping systems and markets that I think just including in this question the benefits of alternate reporting, not just to reduce regulatory burden, but to make compliance actually more meaningful and engaging growers in those systems in ways that make sense for that system.
Thank you. That's a good point. Michael.
Thank you, Ali. Very nicely written there and explained. I wanted to distinguish this situation, if I agree, crops that have very low risk of nitrogen discharge should have a less regulatory burden, like the grapes, or alfalfa. But it seems like, as sort of what Thomas was hinting at, just because you don't use the groundwater or there's a low risk of getting to the groundwater, I don't know if you can just say they're exempt, and as others have pointed out, that's a high bar, right? Maybe a simpler way to report. And if the nitrogen that's discharged is not going to the groundwater, it's likely it's going to surface water. And maybe, in your situation with the Salton Sea, nobody uses that water. However, there is environmental concerns there. In our area, we have a whole area near the coast that's tile drained. And essentially there's no nitrate leaching down the groundwater there, but all that nitrate's going out into the National Marine Sanctuary. So I think our water board has said, well, just because it doesn't go down the groundwater, it's still impactful. And so there are other regions where there may be a clay layer, the nitrate's not leaching down the groundwater, but it's going somewhere.
Thank you, Michael. Daniel.
I fully agree with Ruth. Exploring alternative pathways to reporting. That sounds sounds a good way to write it. Exemption is a really strong word. So I would totally support writing alternative pathways to reporting in the answer wherever possible.
I think the problem comes from the Water Control Board. They put this language on that question. That's why we just followed.
But yeah, I think for us, or I would feel much more comfortable writing it that way than writing exemptions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe it depends on the system too, which maybe if there is something that really does seem to merit an exemption, we could write it that way. And maybe most of the things would be in the alternate reporting category.
Thank you. So, Thomas, please.
Yeah, I don't know that I feel that we can decide whether, it's an exception or an alternative method. I think that should be left to the process. But the direct question is there enough data and scientific research that would support other exceptions or alternative methods? And I don't feel like I have that, scientific data. There's enough data to say, yes, there might be some places where this could be considered, but I'm not in a position to make that decision. I think that really needs research, that needs potentially a lot of data collection, the entire process that the Rice Coalition has gone through. And, for that matter, perhaps the Central Valley Dairy Representative Monitoring Program, that's a huge program, lots of data collection, lots of analysis. And then, from that, a design of that program and whether that's an exception or an alternative method for complying would have to be decided after that data collection and analysis and assessment is done.
Thank you. So, Daniel,
Do we have other comments or
Yeah.
Richard? Yes.
Richard, please.
Yeah, maybe this kind of dovetails with what Thomas was just saying regarding that paragraph I put in there about the organic farming. First of all, I agree with the comments that Daniel, you made, and we can modify that to make that more clear, and precise. But the thing about it is, I don't know that we have the data yet to make some kind of judgment about organic farming. And but I wanted to have that in there as a placeholder, if nothing else, that this is an issue that needs it needs more research. And I think in some cases it may very well be shown that, I'm pretty confident that some of these organic operations are going to be shown to be very low risk of discharging nitrate because of the type of farming that they're doing and the kind of inputs they're putting into it and so forth. So that's really all I wanted to say about that. I don't know if that's even a useful thing to have it in there, but I just thought, hey, this is our chance. Who knows when we'll get another shot at including a concept like that. So there it is. That's kind of the background, at least from my perspective, on why I put that there.
Thank you. Oh, Hannah, do you have a question?
Ruth was first.
Oh, Ruth, please.
Just wanted to follow up on Richard's comment that I also support the inclusion of organic farms in this category, at least as a placeholder. I agree there's not a lot of data, but I think it is likely that there's a lot of those operations that are minimally impacting nitrate leaching, and I think it's worth noting that.
Thank you. Hannah?
Yeah, I think I'm wondering if I agree with Thomas that it's probably above our pay grade to decide on exemptions versus alternative compliance pathways, but I think we could frame the answer to this question in terms of needing to conduct more research in the rigorous manner that the rice growers did. And so perhaps framing the response as there could be alternative compliance pathways developed or exemptions developed, for multiple different systems. However, more data is needed. And we point to the rice coalition's approach to providing that. And I think, I think it's great. It would be great to dig into this, understanding of organic systems. I also just want to note that, organic is a huge umbrella term, that there's a lot of variety of the ways organic growers manage organically. And so I think you might, I think if that research is going to be conducted, we really need to define define what we're talking about in terms of organic management carefully.
Thank you. Michael?
I just wanted to remind those who may not be aware, years ago, there was sort of an exemption for wine grapes in our area. I don't think it's there anymore. It was through the SIP program, so Sustainable in Practice. And so the wine grape growers had a whole program to assure that they were not causing, nitrate pollution, overusing pesticides. And so they self-assessed, but also had audits. And so that was sort of an alternative program that got them out of reporting, if I believe. And I don't think that's the case today, but that was in the earlier ag orders.
Yeah, thank you. So, I think the conclusion, what I heard is we identify these areas and crops, and we think, they might be or they could be part of the exemption, and then we recommend to the water board to, to do the practice or whatever research or, the approach they have. But do really we need to, I don't know, because, do really we need to refer to the RISE? Because, that RISE process is a very long process. Maybe we do not need to recommend that. We just recommend these areas. It seems, the science support for those alternative or something. But if we refer to RISE, I think we already accept everything and we recommend to whatever it is. I don't know, because I don't really know what the process was entirely for RISE. So how we can recommend? Or observation is we identify this area, there might be needs for some other alternative approaches. But that's it. If we go that to link it to RISE, I don't know, we should do that or not. Please, I don't know, Ruth or Thomas, the first.
Ruth goes first.
Please.
This is just my personal feeling. When conducting research that is likely to require funding and a lot of resources, I think it is important to look at things like return on investment or sort of cost benefits, or what is the impact of spending all that time and money to do that research. For example, with nursery crops, growing containers for ornamental species, my personal opinion is it's probably not a good use of, for example, FREP dollars to determine nitrogen removal coefficients for every one of hundreds of ornamental species. That it's probably better to address that in a different way. And I think we need to look at that when requiring research. I'm not sure what the answer to that is for this particular question, but I think just I hear what Ali's saying about maybe if there are ways to determine that there's a much lower likelihood of nitrate leaching without doing the level of rigor that the Rice Commission did, maybe those should be considered too. Where that bar is exactly, I think I would leave up to my colleagues, but I think it's a good point.
Thank you, Ruth. Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, so I had copied in writing the response to question 9. I had copied additional information that I received from the State Water Board staff that includes that footnote 33. And there is a section of that footnote that actually reads, and I'm going to read it out loud. In addition, the regional water boards were given the discretion to apply alternative requirements to some or all growers in the following categories, and there's 3 of them. One is growers who operate in areas with limited nitrogen impacts, have minimal nitrogen inputs, and have difficulty measuring crop yield. Second, diversified socially disadvantaged growers, and then there's specifics to that. And third, other growers who do not operate more than 20 acres. And I think, to me, that I don't have any other categories to suggest besides these. And I think all of the cases that we have sort of highlighted, organics, nurseries, the alfalfa, they could all fall in that first category. What my recommendation, what I would suggest that we do as a panel is we actually, in this answer, we structure it in a way where we call out the specific commodities or regions that we think are candidates to be considered, and we provide the information that we can provide based on what research that we as a group have done, to perhaps to have that there, and then let this process sort of have its own life. But our contribution would be to say, here's some of the most promising candidates for this kind of process. Here's information that we have, and leave it at that. That would be my proposal.
Thank you, Thomas.
A lot of good suggestions. And Thomas and Ali, do you think you have enough information to revise
Of course.
the,
I need Thomas.
response to question 9?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the comments. Great. And you put a lot of comments too. I appreciate, Daniel.
Welcome. Anything else to question 9, or shall we move on? Okay, then thanks a lot, Thomas and Ali, for the first draft, and looking forward to seeing the next draft. And hopefully we can probably discuss it next week when we meet next week. Okay, then another question that we don't have a very clean draft is question 7D, the last part of question. And also because not all the comments were incorporated there. And I thought when I read it, or when I started compiling everything in the final report, I had the impression, oh, we need to have a closer look at it before we have a version to include. And Richard, would you be willing to address the question 7D and lead the discussion?
Yeah, what I'd like to do, Michael provided a very, amazing and thorough explanation for that 7D. And I mean, we have, also, what we wrote initially, and then we have a lot of responses from Thomas in that section too. But Michael wrote a real comprehensive response to that. And so I'd like to see if, Michael, if you could talk about that now, this time.
Sure. I guess I should share screen here. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this question D concerns, there's these 3 pathways, and I'll get to those in a moment. For calculating the A minus R, and then each pathway has different sort of targets that are adjusted. In pathway 1 is sort of the one that includes nitrogen applied in the irrigation water on the A side. But in pathway 2 and 3, it appears at least that A from irrigation water is sort of excluded, but then on the right, the targets have been changed. Maybe I should actually show that slide there. But I'll show it in a second.
Michael, sorry, is it possible to zoom in just a little bit?
Sure.
And I know that you had some red line comments. I'm not sure. I think it's in simple markup right now. If you just click on review and switch to full markup, then people will be able to see exactly where the changes were. It's right in the middle there. To the left of, well, my left. Simple markup.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, so this I'll go through this anyway. So you got these 3 pathways, and the question is it okay to exclude A from the irrigation water and those other 2 pathways? So that's sort of the general question, but we saw these testimony that calculating nitrogen in the irrigation water, some growers were saying they weren't able to substitute that water for fertilizer, it was high in nitrate. So I did want to go through some of this. I think this first bullet point here is from Thomas, and just emphasizing, we don't want these regulations to discourage people from making use of nitrogen from the irrigation water and crediting it as part of the nutrient program for their crops. And so that's just sort of a general statement. Now, we've done field research trials. Richard and I did those a number of years ago, where we had water with different nitrate concentrations, and we showed in lettuce and broccoli that you could substitute a large portion of the nitrogen fertilizer for the water, and it was pretty much 1-to-1, and I think that's well understood from those trials. What the presenters, back in December may not completely understand is that it can't make up all the nitrogen that the crop needs. So, it's really the nitrogen from the water that the crop's taking up, you give credit for, but you still are going to need fertilizer in many cases to meet all the crop needs. So that's this second point here. And the third point here is, originally in the ag order, they were suggesting that growers would credit all the water they apply in this calculation, right? And so if they did that, I guess this is the fourth point here, it would discourage growers from using those high nitrate wells, because what we've learned is really it's the amount of water sort of equal to ET that the crop takes up where it's getting the nutrients, and there's a lot of conditions where growers are applying extra water for various reasons. And so this point here is just sort of outlining those. For example, early in the season, we're applying water for germination, transplant establishment. The crop is not taking up much nitrogen at that phase, but you need to irrigate. And so that water drains below the root zone. And again, that points to why we just credit the ET part. And often we're using water even before the crop is planted for soil preparation and, getting the beds ready, germinating weeds or leaching salts. Again, this is water that's applied and it drains. There's no crop there, so how do you credit that, for the crop? And then we often have to have a leaching fraction, which by definition is the amount of water that drains below the root zone, and that's necessary if you're growing salt-sensitive crops like lettuce or strawberries or many tree crops. So that is also water that's not going to provide nitrogen to the crop because it's draining below. And so we often, during the season, often have to do maintenance leaching for salt management. And we have to take into account that our systems, our application systems, whether it's drip or sprinklers, are not perfectly uniform. And so extra water is applied for that. And when we get to very high concentrations of nitrogen, in the irrigation water, you can't expect the plant's roots to take up all that nitrogen. It's less than 100% efficient. And then the final complication is we do have a lot of ranches or farms where there's multiple water sources with different amounts of nitrogen in these different sources, different concentrations in these sources. And so in this case, growers have challenges in using this water from these different sources and understanding how much nitrogen they should be crediting. So I just wanted to outline in this point, all the complications in making nitrogen budgets and accounting for the nitrogen in the irrigation water. Then the next point here is that what is in the ag order currently, 4.0, is saying you calculate A from the irrigation water based on the volume equal to evapotranspiration or the amount of water you applied, whichever is smaller. So we do have cases where you might be deficit irrigating, or a portion of the water that the crop received is from rainfall. And so applied water could be less than evapotranspiration. But whichever is smaller would be the right volume to use in the calculation. So I understood, from what Thomas had said, that that's great, for the farmer, but if we're doing modeling and trying to estimate loading to the aquifer, we're sort of underestimating what's coming from what water is applied. And I don't see a conflict between, for the targets, using evapotranspiration volume, but for reporting to just know how much is being loaded the aquifer, to also, ask growers to explain how much of that water they're applying, how much water are they actually applying over the season. So you could still do the modeling and still calculate the leaching that you might have. So now I wanted to talk about these 3 different pathways, and I will switch to some slides here. So let me get that. So I'm going to stop there and share. Here. All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to lay out, the calculation of how you figure out how many pounds of nitrogen you're applying based on the concentration of nitrate in the water and how much water you apply in terms of depth. And it's pretty simple calculation. You have your N concentration times the depth of water applied, or the ET in inches, times this factor 0.227. And so this is an example. We have 47 parts per million nitrate N in the irrigation water. And let's say the crop ET is 7 inches. Now they may apply 12 inches, but as Ag Order 4.0 would suggest, you would use this 7-inch number. And multiplying that together, you get 70 pounds of nitrogen per acre that's applied per that crop. And if you grew 2 crops, and let's say this is lettuce, over the year, your A from the irrigation water would be 150 pounds. Let's see. Gotta make this turn here. So here, pathway 1 is pretty straightforward. It's A fert times A compost times A organic matter plus A from the irrigation water minus R is your N loading, and then you're comparing that with your target. You'll see I asked the question for these different targets and these different pathways, what is the amount of nitrogen you could apply from fertilizer, compost, and organic matter? Organic fertilizers together. What's the total sum, and still reach a certain target. So I just rearranged like pathway 1, where we move AIR and R onto this side of the equation here. So just so we could calculate what this is. And so I'll show you a table of the different pathways. Here's pathway 2, and that one's straightforward because there's no AIR included. But what it's essentially saying is your target is R. It is the removal in every scenario. And it really means that it's on both sides of the equation and they cancel out, essentially. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's still there. It's just, it's on the other side of the equation. So the target really is R plus whatever's you're applying in the water for pathway 2. And then pathway 3 is much like pathway 1, except they capped what you have to take credit for to 200 pounds of N per acre. So that's the only difference there. So they're a little confusing to have all these different pathways. And so I was curious, you know, if for different scenarios, you know, how would this all resolve itself? And so scenario 1 is, we'll just say the removal for a lettuce crop is 62.5 pounds per acre. So times 2 crops, it's 125 pounds over the years. And so in scenario 1, we have the removal is greater than what we have in the water. And so in the water is 47 parts per million N. And it's the same 7 inches. And we have 2 crops per year. So AIR is 150, like we were calculating before. In scenario 2, our R is also, let's see, actually our R is less than what's in the irrigation water, should be a less sign. But the irrigation water is greater than 200. And so you have 225 pounds of N, because the nitrate concentration in this case is 71 parts per million. So the same amount of water is being applied, but you just have a higher concentration. And then scenario 3, we have a lower concentration, and so R is actually less than what's being applied in the irrigation water over the year. So these are sort of 3 possible scenarios that you might have. And I was curious, okay, with these 3 pathways, what happens? What is the maximum amount of nitrogen you could apply from fertilizer, organic matter, organic amendments and organic fertilizers, and still make these different targets? Let's see. So here's scenario 1. And here's the 3 pathways.
Michael, can I interrupt for just a sec?
Yeah.
If you go back, I am confused that AIRR term, when in these 3 calculations, do you assume AIRR is everything in the 12 inches?
No,
and when do you assume it's only the part that's in the 7 inches that's goes into ET?
You never assume it's in the 12 inches.
So your your AIRR is always considered to be just what's basically in the crop ET, the N that comes with crop ET. So your 47 ppm and 7 inches, or your 71 ppm and 7 inches.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So let's go with this. Here's scenario 1, and here's like 3 targets: 300, 200, 100. This is per year of pounds of N per acre. And I took that rearranged equation to calculate what's the total you could apply with fertilizer, compost, and organic fertilizers. And so because, you know, pathway 2 says it just equals R, and we said 125 is the removal, it's always 125. But with pathway 1 and pathway 3, they're pretty comparable, because in this case, AIR is less than 200, right? So there's really no difference between pathway 3 and pathway 1. And you can see you would go with 1 or 3, you wouldn't go with 2. Then when you get down to 100, you start seeing, oh, pathway 1, 75. So is pathway 3. So it'd be pathway 2 would be most, I guess, beneficial for the growers. So here's scenario 2. Again, I got the R wrong. Direction there, it should be greater. I mean, actually, it's less. That's right, that's less. And so here, now, what's in the water, because this is a high concentration, remember, 71 ppm. So pathway 3 becomes sort of favorable compared to pathway 1, because we sort of capped it at 200 pounds. And so it allows grower to put more fertilizer on, or more compost or organic fertilizer. And once we get down to 100, there's no difference between pathway 2 and 3. And then when we get down to 100, pathway 2 is again the most favorable, right? So you start seeing some conflicts as you get down to these lower targets by having that pathway 2. And then this is the scenario where R is greater than in the irrigation water. And so the irrigation water is 100 because it's only 31 parts per million N. But again, all these are the same volumes of water being applied. In this case, pathway 1 and 3 and 2, well, you go with 1 or 3 until you get to this low target, and then they're all the same. And so in most cases, you know, in these two scenarios, you're going to probably be going with pathway 2 when you get to very low targets. And so if you were trying to make a low target, you really can't get beyond A being equal to R plus the nitrogen in the irrigation water, right? So that's sort of outlined there. I forgot to show you that R is 125 in all these scenarios. So, you know, I proposed, and I see what you think about it, is let's try to get the confusion out of this and just have one pathway. And the idea would be sort of combine this where we just sort of, you know, maybe cap the maximum that growers would have to credit to 200 pounds or less, or what crop in uptake is. Because, you know, if you grew, I don't know, baby lettuce, it can't, if it only can take up, that crop can only take up, say, 100 pounds of N over the season, over the year. You can't expect the grower to have to take credit for the whole, you know, 200 pounds. So that's a little change I put in there. And if you want to talk about pathway 2, really what pathway 2 is about is suggesting that the minimum target might be AIR plus R, but that's all debatable, right? I don't know if that's necessary to talk about now, but I think this would be more of a simplified way of approaching it. I think it's reasonable, you know, if a grower's crops are taking up, you know, 300 or 400 pounds of N over the season, to say, yeah, you're required to take up credit for some of that nitrogen. And it would be equal, again, to the amount in ET. So 200 is the maximum that they would have to credit. But in many cases, the ET is less enough and the concentration low enough that they would never approach 200 pounds for most cases. It's just for the really extreme concentrations, or if you had a very large ET that you might get above 200 pounds. So it's really an extreme case. So let's see.
And why would you limit it, Michael? Why would you limit it to 200? I mean, if they have some special crop that actually can remove 300 pounds of nitrogen from the irrigation water in a really high nitrate well, it seems like, wow, that's great.
Well, I think this was the precedence that was already set in Ag Order 4.0. They put the limit of 200. And the reason was they didn't want to discourage growers from saying, I'm going to not use that high nitrate well. The reason might be is say you get to 200 because the concentration is I don't know, 90 parts per million N, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably unlikely that every time you put water on at 90 parts per million, that the plant is taking up all that nitrogen in the water. I mean, that's really how you get to those really high numbers, is having these really high concentrations. And so it's recognizing that plants aren't 100% efficient in taking nitrogen up out of solution. They can take a lot of it, and they probably do it better than fertilizer, right? But I think it was a reasonable ask or idea from the Region 3 to sort of cap it at 200.
Mm-hmm. So basically, they get less on the input side. They don't have to get to their nitrogen discharge. They don't have to account for all of that nitrogen, even if the ET and if the ET is high and the N in the irrigation water is high, once it's over 200, they don't have to account for it anymore.
Right. I mean, they're accounting for it. It's just they don't have to report it, right?
Yeah.
They can still make their targets. And I think it's a good place to start because we have a lot. We don't have a lot of experience. I mean, we're just trying to get growers to credit nitrogen in their irrigation water. And a lot of them are struggling to figure out how to do that. And one of the important parts is that they really have to understand that you have to look at how much nitrogen is in your soil and what are you getting from the water, sort of all together, to really make decisions on how much you can reduce your fertilizer. If you see your soil nitrates really high and your next 7 days, you're putting water on for the next 7 days, and that's going to be 20 pounds of N, and the crop uptake's only 20 pounds, and then you have this high soil nitrate, you're very confident not to use any fertilizer. But if your soil nitrate is very low and you're putting on 20 pounds of N for the next 7 days through the irrigation, and you're not quite sure, you might want to put a little fertilizer on, right? So I think growers are still learning how to use nitrate in the water. Let's see. I know Richard had his hand up.
Mike, just real quick, what you were showing was for double crop scenarios and for Region 3, right? And it seems like for a single crop, like, in other areas where that's the norm rather than...
Right.
It seems like this looks very promising. That's my impression. This looks very reasonable What's your thoughts on that?
Are you saying that because in say a almond crop?
Well, I don't know what the ET is in a, but like, let's say, processing tomatoes, like what's the ET for?
Yeah, it'd probably be 25 inches, 30 inches at the most.
30 inches of, tomato. Oh, wow.
Well, it's a 120-day crop in a very hot area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think they put on maybe they don't have a huge leaching fraction there necessarily.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to be giving, and let's say the water is, 40 parts per million, like you showed. That is actually the water is going to be a huge part of the A side of the equation. So maybe what I just said is not correct. Anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it depends on what the ET is, and it depends on what the nitrate concentration of the water is. I think in a lot of places in the Central Valley, it's not that high. But the ET can be quite high.
I mean, I just did it like 40 parts per million over 30 inches. That's 300, over 300 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it could be pretty significant.
Mhm.
But I don't know how common 40 parts per million nitrate N is for tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ali.
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation information. Since we have audience, I think it's good to just verify these. All the scenarios you mentioned, they are in the high nitrate side, 35, 40, 70 part per millions. But we also have water with, nitrate less than 1 in the state. So it means we should not expect always 100 pounds of nitrogen comes from irrigation water. We should expect some water to have just 1 pound of per acre nitrogen from irrigation water, like Colorado River water is 0.2 part per millions. That's the nitrate level of, here. So it means the contribution from irrigation water is almost nothing. It's better to eliminate it even from the story and calculations sometimes.
Well, you're very welcome to put it at 0 if it's 0. Yeah, it's just for
Exactly.
reporting, so it's not a problem if it's low.
I mean, it's good to audience, know about we have not all water, we have that high nitrate. We have clean, good waters in the state too. That was my point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah. A lot of the water is not contaminated with nitrate.
Yeah.
I think, in some regions it's maybe 25% of the wells or so, or 30% are above 10 parts per million. But there's other regions it's much lower. Yeah, Thomas.
Michael, do you have some insights on pathway 2? To me, pathway 2 is exactly the same as pathway 3, except for it basically says your R is exactly your applied nitrogen, not including the AIR. It's kind of a special case of 3.
You're right. And it's saying basically, well, the target is R and essentially plus AIR, right? Because you just move, it's like you have it on both sides of the equation there. So.
And then your limits are going to be basically, I guess the difference is that I'm looking at the egg order on page 52 at the table. For pathway 2, your applied has to be exactly your removed, and there's no, and nothing is taken into account with AIR. If you do go 3, your compliance limits are going to go down by 200 units.
Yeah.
Which
that's the
basically
difference.
means you really only want to do 3 if your AIR is larger than 200. If it's less than 200, you're better off going with 1. Isn't that how this was designed?
Yeah, except when you get to very low targets, right? So I'm showing you here again. So you got these targets, you see how they're going down to like 100, 50, 100. When you start getting down there,
Yeah.
R wins. This pathway 2 wins every time. I mean,
Exactly.
1, 2, 3,
But
or
with
1.
pathway 3, you would have to comply with a minus 150 at the very end instead of 50, or with minus 100 instead of hundreds. So it's those limits are all by 200 lower, meaning you only win if your AIR were more than 200. If it's more than 200, then that compliance pathway 3 gives you a better target. If it's less than 200, you want to go with compliance pathway 1 or 2.
Yeah, that's what I'm showing here.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just catching up here.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out that there is some, problems with having these 3 pathways when you get to the lower targets. And so maybe it makes sense to just have 1 pathway. Yeah, it's just a suggestion. They can do what they want, but I think we can point out that there's some inconsistencies here. But I hope I didn't confuse everyone. Oh, yeah, Daniel.
Thanks. My impression was that pathway 2, there's probably a mistake. It should be less or equal. But I totally agree with you. It's confusing, these 3 pathways, and I would also recommend having just 1 pathway. And the pathway 3 is really, that's where the cap of 200 pounds per acre comes from. So we can discuss that, but I totally agree with you. It should be simpler. It's just confusing to have 3 different pathways.
Yeah, Hannah.
Would it be possible to share that presentation with us?
Sure. Yeah, Richard.
So, looking at 40 parts per million times 0.227, that's 9 pounds per inch times 7 inches. So that's 63 pounds of nitrogen, from the irrigation water. And then you said R is removal, right? And
Yeah.
so like if R is for a lettuce crop is 60 pounds, that's 120 pound budget for that crop. And that's pretty much at the very low end of fertilizing a lettuce crop.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have some residual nitrogen in the soil to make that work.
Right.
Anyway, just the reality check.
Yeah, and so I think the other question is, what should those targets be? And But if we're starting high, it's not going to be an issue till they get lower.
Yeah.
Richard and Hannah, you were writing the draft for question 7. I assume you will have to continue, but do you have enough information with what Mike presented and with all the comments to revise just that part of question 7D? Or clean up, or I don't know what the right word is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll get to work on it. And no, but I really see, this is exactly what we needed. This is such valuable input coming from Michael and from Thomas and everybody else who contributed to that question 7D. I mean, to me, that this is still continues to be a very tricky issue. And like Mike said, the growers are struggling with this. I know myself, I struggle with it because we've got to be careful here, and get this right, because we can't be recommending something that's, agronomically, we just have to we have to think this one through. So we'll get to work on it.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? And I'm looking forward to, thank you so much, Michael, for helping us out with this and providing all this detail. And I'm looking forward to going over your presentation a little more in depth. So if these 3 pathways remained, just procedurally, could a farmer jump between, like, I guess it depends on what they're growing, so what the removed is, and what their concentration of nitrate is in the irrigation water. There's, who decides what pathway are they on?
Oh, yeah. So my understanding was the regional board will choose the pathway that gives them the best chance to comply, right? So
okay.
That's why I was sort of calculating, and I shaded the area of which one pathway is going to help them the most.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and so in most cases, they're going to be using 1 or 2 until the targets get quite low, and then it would, 1 and 3, and then when the targets get very low, they would be using 2. But it's
Michael, how I don't remember how that was written. They presented those 3 pathways, and then who chose the grower or the how did that get reported?
No, they just report what they applied and, all the components. And then it's just automated when they enter the data. It's what I understood of which pathway they would sort of go through.
So the data got processed into those 3 pathways, and then
whichever is lowest, right?
Oh, okay, that was the criteria. Whichever was lowest,
or whichever one gets them to the target, best. So obviously, if they had AIR above 200, they're going to go with pathway 3. Just sort of automatically. If it was below that,
yeah,
then it's going to be pathway 1. And then I think the pathway 2 would only come into play at the very low targets.
Okay.
Or if you had a very high R.
Pathway 2 is saying you can.
I think Thomas disappeared.
Did I disappear?
Oh,
Am I there?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We don't hear you.
Probably, if you can hear us, Thomas, try to turn off the camera. It seems the bandwidth
Try
isn't
something else.
enough. We still can't hear you, Thomas.
Yeah, I can hear you, but
Probably try to turn off the camera.
yeah, let me try that.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I don't. We still don't hear you.
Note that Thomas is joining us from Japan, so on a
That's weird. I'm gonna come right back.
Okay.
Have other comments about question 7D? Otherwise, I think we'll probably wait for the next version before I try to incorporate it into the final report, because there may be a little bit more discussion next time. The same with question 9. So I think it's worth cleaning it up a bit more before we incorporate it into the draft of the final report.
I think Thomas is back.
Can you guys hear me now? Is
Yes.
this better? Okay, not sure what that was all about. All I was saying is that compliance pathway 2 basically says as long as you're not applying more water, not including more nitrogen than you're removing, not including the irrigation water on N, you're in good shape. Then you can have whatever N is in the irrigation water. Right? And so that then becomes an attractive limit when that irrigation water N goes into the way of meeting those lower limits.
Yeah, I mean, it's saying you can apply as much fertilizer as R, equal to R.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you can match that, then you're in great shape. But what if you actually do less? What if you had less on the applied side in compliance pathway 2 than on the removed side? Then do you automatically fall into compliance pathway 1 or 3 if we're not exactly matching it?
That's what I mentioned. My impression is it should be less or equal, also based on the text. I think that's not very clear there, but I think it should really be less or equal.
Okay. Yeah, now I get what you were saying, Daniel. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, the R means that's the target. You can be less than the target. There's no problem with that. So you're right, Daniel, less or equal. But the maximum they could apply would be R.
The other piece I wanted to say, this is one way to go about it. I want to also make sure that we're not discrediting what the Central Valley has done and the pathway that the Central Valley is going. I think I would not want our answer to this be interpreted as this is how it has to be in the Central Valley as well.
Yeah, I think pathway 2 is about making a target, right? It's like pathway 1, but saying the target is AIR plus R, essentially. So that's essentially what it's saying. And like you said, that you can apply as much fertilizer as you remove. Question is that a reasonable target? And I think that's for people regulating to figure out. And we're not close to being there in the Central Coast anyway.
I mean, there's another way of interpreting pathway 2, and assuming it was not an equal sign, but also a smaller or equal sign, saying your target is 0. If you're going to discount your irrigation water, then your target is 0 for A minus R.
Yeah.
And as long as you stay at or below that, then you're in great shape. Manage it with the irrigation water, what you need in surplus, so to speak.
Yeah. But keep in mind, Thomas, that if it's 0, you're never really removing nitrogen from the aquifer.
Yes.
By this method.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And Richard and Hannah, do you think you can present us with a revised version before next meeting or the meeting next week?
Yes, we'll come up with something, right, Hannah?
Yeah. I was wondering if Mike just really briefly could put up his presentation again, just outlining the pathways, so we can look at them for a second. And just, Thomas, you said we don't want to negate isn't the right word, but negate
Right.
what the CV is doing. Is the CV represented in pathway 1?
No, none of these pathways applies to the Central Valley, because the Central Valley essentially does a full accounting of all the nitrogen components for compliance purposes. With targets, it looks at the full nitrogen cycle in all the fields, looks at the potential losses, and
But
then
it's including irrigation, right?
yes, it does.
Okay,
exactly.
That's what I mean. Okay.
Yeah. So
the equation for pathway 1 is how it would be calculated in the Central Valley as well. Just looking at the equation, not the targets or limits, but the equation, that's the one.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, but in the Central Valley, the irrigation water N is 4 to 12 inches. In Mike's example, it would be the N that comes with 12 inches,
Right.
not the N that comes with 7 inches.
Okay.
It's the actually applied N.
Just gonna take note of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you know, if you look at that, also the discount factors in the Central Valley that apply to compost and organic materials, they're going to be depending on soils and management practices and other things that are going to be accounted for in SWAT, in CV SWAT.
Okay.
Okay, any last thoughts or comments, or shall we move on? Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for all the great comments. So just briefly, have about 15 minutes I was working on a final version of the report, basically just combining everything into that report and adding other sections that are based on Thomas's suggestions and some revised suggestions I made. And so that's the document I sent you. I made very few changes to the response to the different questions. So I kept that the way it is. Otherwise, in one question I made rearranged it a little bit, but otherwise it's really still there what you wrote. And I think one reason Thomas suggested an alternative outline was that there is a lot of overlap between the responses for questions, and I haven't removed that yet, but I think really the three main topics, in my opinion, when going through all these questions was we define research needs in several responses to the questions. We propose best management practices, and we also discuss models as an alternative or complementary to A-R. I think these are three topics where we could really go through all the questions and see, do we want to move that out and combine it into a separate section in the report? And other than that, I think it will be best for you to have a look at it, but as Thomas suggested, we start with a background on the nitrogen cycle or plant root zone, focus on the plants and root zones, and then I defined the different pathways or transformations and related it to the terminology in Ag Order 4, so ATHER, ACOMP, AORG, and how they are related to all the pathways we see here. So I added it, for example, where is it? Nitrogen's equation permanent biomass is pathway 6, and that would be R sequestered. So to show people how it is related and which pathways and inputs and outputs are actually included in A-R or not. I have to mention here it's still an early draft and it needs to be some revision. So that was it definitely can be much improved.
So do you have a suggestion on the mechanics of how to go about it, because we have this complicated back and forth process?
Yes, just a second. So then characteristic of agriculture in California, that's also something you suggested, Thomas, and I think it's really good to have that here in the introduction so that people get a better idea. And then introduction of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, we talk a lot about the different regions. I found it's for somebody who's not that familiar with the water board, it may be good to have a map here and a brief description of these regions. So I added that. We should listed all the members of the expert panel. And I was wondering, probably in the appendix, just like the first expert panel, we could add a short bio with a picture if we want to do that, to introduce us a bit in more detail, in not just the numbers and our affiliation. That's something we can discuss. But then, so section 4, that's really the main part of the report, and that's the combination of all the response to the questions we added. And it all starts, that's another discussion. Do we want to list the lead authors, or do we just want to make it as a team effort? That's something we can discuss. They also always list the question, some background, terminology, and then the response and recommendations. And with some of the questions, we also had some additional consideration, or question 1, Richard, it was listed as appendix. I changed that because we have an appendix to the report, so I didn't want to have two different appendices in the report. So I just label it additional considerations. And so that's a really big part, of course, all our responses to the questions. I haven't included 7D yet and 9, so that's still forthcoming. And then I have these sections 5 and 6. That's also based on Thomas's suggestion. And that will be one question. Do we want to combine all our suggestions for research, outreach, and implementations in one place, basically move it out of the individual questions and compile it here? The same with recommendations for good or best management practices. And then also have a section where we discuss about models and how they differ with the AR approach and what they can bring to the table, basically. So these are open questions. And so my suggestion for moving forward would be the following. So the first thing we should all do, read all the responses to the 9 questions and identify sections that need further discussion. So it wasn't the intention that now that everything is in one document that we stop talking about it. There may still be issues we need to discuss. So probably everybody should have a look at all the answers and make a list, including which question and which line number it is we should go back and discuss further. Then as soon as we have final versions or final drafts for question 5, 7D and 9, I will incorporate it. Then section 1, background, needs definitely some work, and Michael offered to help with that. So if you're still available, Mike, then probably the two of us could work on that. And then if you're willing to help with the report, if somebody or a team of 2 could read all the responses, identify a section where we make recommendations for research, and then decide, would it make sense to remove it from individual questions and put it all into that section 5.1? And the same, somebody could have a look at all the recommendations on best management practices and decide, do we want to move it and have an extra or specific sessions that on recommendations? And the same with modeling or SWOT. Do we want to move at least some of the description and have a separate section for that? And for the last modeling, I hope Thomas would agree to help with that. But I think if I remember correctly, Erika, correct me, but I think we can work in teams of 2, but we can now rearrange the teams. So we don't have to work in the same teams of 2 at this point. But if you agree with this suggestions, and well, probably first I would have to ask, is the draft of the report an acceptable first version, or is it totally off? Did you expect something completely different and think I should go back to the drawing board and start from scratch? If not, then we could discuss these issues here. And Richard, you raised your hand.
Well, first of all, thank you for all this effort. I think it's fantastic. You did a lot of organizing, and I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody appreciates it. I guess the question I have on question 1, you said, okay, you had some areas that you flagged that needed to be moved, like to a different question. And I guess the question I have for you is, it sounds like you know where you want to move those sections. So if you want to just go ahead and do that, um, that would be good, rather than me fumbling around trying to figure out what you wanted, where you wanted it moved.
I think I can definitely do it. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to first
Yes.
give everybody a chance to say, yes, that makes sense, or, oh, no, definitely not. But
Yeah.
if nobody's opposed to that, and these are probably things we can also discuss next week, then I can definitely do it, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm speaking, I should consult with Hannah about that, but I mean, from what I could see, it looked reasonable. And so anyway, but how about Hannah and I will get back to you about that. And so if we decide, that it needs to be moved, then how about you move it to where you think it's the best location? Because you're doing all this organizing, so that's fantastic and very helpful.
Hannah?
I like the organization, and I like the idea of pulling out and highlighting recommendations for research and best management. Yeah. I need to think a bit more about like completely removing, having a separate section for the modeling, because I think some of the questions specifically asked about the way, question 7, the way that we calculate it out here. And so, but maybe we can kind of have it in both, where the section on modeling goes into a lot of detail about the approaches, whereas question 7 is just, there can be multiple approaches.
Yeah, no, actually, that's also what I was thinking. We can totally eliminate the word modeling from the responses, but probably when we want to add details, have that in the separate section, so that the response to the question is a bit slimmer and easier to read and doesn't go into that much detail. But of course, when we compare A minus R with models, that needs to be in the response, otherwise we would lose too much. But try to move details to a modeling section where we can really go discuss them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Oh, I like your outline, Daniel. Well done.
Thank you. So who would be motivated to look at all the recommendations for research and see how we could combine that, how much we can actually remove? It will be the same as with models. Some of it will need to remain with the response to the question, but we could have that section specifically about recommendations for research. Is there somebody really motivated to look at that and make a suggestion for next time?
I have a question. I see this red note here. Because I'm happy to do the recommendations for research. I don't think I could get that all done by Monday of next week, if that's the ask.
Yeah, the Monday night, that was just I was thinking our next meeting is on Wednesday. So to give everybody a day to have a look at these suggestions. But of course, if it's not possible, then yes, you can have more time to do that.
Because I think Richard and I have a little more work to do on 7, and then but after that, I'd be willing to work on the recommendations for research.
Great, thank you. Thomas?
Maybe what could be done by Monday is, rather than fleshing it all out, to kind of have just a list of the pieces that would go into this research section, and maybe the same for the best management practices and the modeling, to just kind of have a little bit more detailed outline of what would go into each of these chapters. So I assume that the recommendations for research is your proposed section 5.1 and then 5.2. Oh yeah, you have it right there. And then for the modeling, that would be 6. And what may make sense by Monday is to say, here's some sub bullets to go into each of those sections.
Yeah, I think that would work. And basically, the easiest way would probably be just to highlight the sections that could be moved or that deal with these topics, and then
Oh,
send.
you mean in the current answers to the questions?
Yes. So use that
Yeah.
the draft for the final report and just highlight the sections you think they could be moved.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then send them to Sam whenever you're ready. And I think Sam, at this stage, it would not make sense to combine everything into one. Just keep the 3 of them separate and send these to us. And then we just open one document when we want to discuss recommendations, another when we want to talk about best management practices.
Yeah, that was kind of along the lines of what I was going to ask. I know that there'll be a major update after your discussion on the 14th, and you sort things out and replace some of the responses. So yeah, just wanted to check on how you wanted that facilitated on the 14th. That's great, though.
I think so. Yes, just send out whatever you get from team members.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to work on recommendations for best management practices.
Thanks a lot. Mike? You're mute.
Oh, I don't know if I'm biting off too much, but I can sort of back up Richard, on that. Or can I mean, if I'm working with you, does that mean I can't work with Richard now?
Aha. Oh yeah, that's another question. Who can answer that?
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
You have an echo.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that we'll have to maintain just really clear just teams of 2, so we won't be able to have one person that be part of 2 teams in this scenario. But each week you guys can, I believe my understanding is that each week you guys can reset the team. So you could work together in sets of 2 for the next week. And then next week, if you guys have different assignments, reset.
So we're a bit more flexible now with teams, but individual member can only be part of 1 2-person team at the time.
Yes, I believe that's correct. And I'll send any follow-up after we confirm tomorrow morning, but I'm given how much coaching we've had, I feel comfortable saying that I feel fairly confident that that's true. So.
Okay, sorry, Richard, but I would really appreciate Mike's help with the background.
Do you want a thumb wrestle for Mike or what?
We can switch the following week.
Well, that's a good point. When are you working on your section, Daniel, the background? Are you working on it this week or next week or what?
I was planning on working on it before the next meeting, yes. But that will also depend how much time you have, Mike. But I have a few things I know I need to improve.
But I know you're traveling, Mike, so I don't know if the week after that works for you. That would be the week of the 19th.
Yeah, that week I am traveling a lot.
Yeah, okay.
So
okay, well maybe somebody else.
It doesn't really matter, Mike. Which part would you like to tackle first?
No,
I can also make the revisions. My list of revisions on the background, and then you can have a look at it after. Do you want to work with Richard on recommendations on best management practices this week?
Well, I'll stick with you. And then next week, I guess. Yeah, that's fine. As long, I mean, unless you don't have people for the other ones.
I can help, Richard, if you want.
Yeah, Ali,
I will help. Richard.
you would help Richard with best management practices.
Yes.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ali.
I can be in the modeling team.
That would be great. Thank you, Thomas. I was hoping you would lead that
Oh, good.
because you're the one who has the best
Yeah.
overview.
Yeah.
That's why I volunteered you, basically.
Oh, good.
Okay, so then, yeah, we will see how whatever you can do until next meeting, but probably for next meeting in a week when we meet in those who can meet in Sacramento, really have a look at all the responses and identify the sections that need further discussion. So that may be our main discussion for we have in a week. Just go again through the questions and see what needs more work or where don't we agree yet. And I know we're almost out of time. I just want to add one more comment. When we go back to the report, you will see right at the end, I added this section, dissenting opinions. I really hope we're not going to use it, but it was a question we had last time, or we didn't really have time to discuss. What if somebody just cannot agree with the majority of the panel? And I hope we can find or write our answers in a way that we're all comfortable with. But if there are sections somebody or one or two of us don't feel comfortable with, that could be one way to deal with it. That we in that section we write, for example, the majority of the panel recommends this, but there is a dissenting opinion, and then that person or the people who don't agree could write the dissent here. I hope we're not going to use it, or as little as possible, because I really think the more dissenting opinions we have, the weaker the entire report will be. But that was just one way. You may have better ideas how to deal with that if it comes up, but that was one suggestion how we could do that. If there are really things somebody says, no, I cannot agree with that, or I cannot support that opinion. But that's also something to think about. Probably you have better ideas if that comes up, how we want to deal with it in the report. I just wanted to mention that so you can think about other options or whether that would be acceptable. Mike?
So for this upcoming, the next work group meeting, which is Wednesday next week, can we still give comments about the different questions, or you want to keep things clean so you just have 3 versions?
So my suggestion would be that when you have comments, don't enter it into the document, but write down the line number and then add your comments in a separate document and send it to Sam. And then Sam can compile all these comments we have, and we can go start with question 1 and discuss them on Monday. But if possible, probably just make a list. I have continuous line numbers throughout the document. I'm planning to remove them, but for the moment, it's the easiest way to find a specific section. So just write down this comment, or this recommendation, I don't agree, or I would like to make a specific comment. I think at the moment that would be easiest.
Okay.
And so, yeah, please, everybody, have a look at the questions. those that are the response to the questions, those that now are in the final report, and decide where do we need to have a further discussion. And so that I think that would be our main task next week, to go through that list and discuss these issues. Also, if you have ideas, of course, for the outline of the final report or things you think should be included or are not necessary, that's also something we can discuss. So it's a draft, an early draft of the final report. There we can still make a lot of changes.
The one tiny modification to it, if you could send suggestions and revisions to all of the staff that are on the emails, that would be wonderful, just so we can all track it together.
And this is for the 3 documents that you sent us yesterday, Sam, the one on Q7D, the new draft report, and was it question 9? That's not incorporated yet, right? So
I would
basically
say
use
probably
the,
for question 7D and 9, let's wait for the next version of the draft.
okay, do nothing there at this point.
Yes, wait for
Okay.
you and Ali for 9 and Richard and Hannah until we have the next version, and then we can submit more comments.
So I'm
That
still
would be
doing
my
my changes to,
suggestion.
okay, and so I'm still doing my changes to Q9 with Ali. Actually, I
Yes.
won't, okay,
Well, we
Yes,
can.
so the teams of 2 will work on it, but if somebody has other comments that weren't discussed today, probably wait and then send it to the authors once we have the next version. Probably these comments are already addressed when we see the next version.
okay.
Daniel, as we're closing out this conversation, could you send me that slide with the different assignments for the teams, just so I can blast it out to the group? And then,
yes.
Michael, I know Hannah had requested the slides that you put up on 7D. Can you send those over to me as well? And I'll get those out to the full group.
Yeah, I already sent them to you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Sam, are you going to summarize these instructions for what we're doing next with our comments?
Yeah, I'll put
That'd be
together.
wonderful.
Daniel,
Thanks.
just so I don't misstate anything, I'll shoot a quick email to you with what I heard. If you could just confirm it, and then I'll get it out to the group.
That's good, yeah.
Okay, great.
And just to
Okay.
clarify, the teams are not yet divorced, or are we already having new teams, or is that gonna not happen until next week? These new teams that were just formulated.
We can have new teams, but everybody can only be on one team at the moment. But we can switch with every week, as I understood it, we can create new teams of 2.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe it's fine now that Richard and Ali work on best management practices.
And as you make your revisions to question 7 and then question 9 as well, you're still able to work in your original teams for those.
Okay.
Yeah. Please, staff, just jump in.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, it's confusing in here because we have multiple computers. You can hear me?
Yeah.
So I think just one concern comes up, because Ollie's working with Thomas. So if Ollie switched teams now, Thomas would have to do revisions to 9 on his own, or find another partner to work on revisions for 9. But
I
Ollie's
think I'm fine. I have enough direction to take it to the next level and then let Ali comment on it in the next round.
Okay.
So Ali can work with Richard right away. I don't want to hold him up.
Okay, but now you're a team of 1 on 2 themes.
Who wants to join me on the modeling theme?
Silence is deafening.
I would love to, but I can't.
Probably after 1 week, so I will work on
Maybe we'll have to
background, but
play
afterwards
week
I
to week
would
ping pong or
enjoy
something.
working on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll get started on it, and then we'll see who can be available next week.
Just do whatever is possible.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody.
One
It was
question
great
I have,
discussion.
Daniel, I have one question. You had earlier mentioned, if I understood it correctly, that we were supposed to suggest which pieces of each question can go into which section of the research. Can I also apply this the other way around? I'm going to hijack pieces for my modeling part from the various questions.
Yeah, so you would do the same. Yeah, you can go through the question and see, okay, well, that's too much detail on modeling. Let's move that to section 6.
Okay.
And probably keep a short description. As we mentioned, it may not be, or it's not desirable to exclude modeling completely, but if you think, well, that's too much detail, I would like to have it with the other parts in section 6, it makes much more sense that, yes, it's the same would apply. Highlight these sections you think should be moved to the section on modeling.
Okay, I got you. Great, thank you.
Right.
Okay,
Daniel,
thanks everybody for the great discussion. I think we're out of time, or we have 2 presenters today. So Sam, back to you.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Staff, if you could name Divya Prakash as a co-host as well, that would be wonderful. So these are 2 presentations that have been a long time coming. We're joined by Eric Porse and Divya Prakash from UC-ANR to discuss small and diversified farms, and Joji Muramoto to discuss high carbon amendments. Really pleased to have them both online today. And for the UC-ANR team, I have you up first, and I have your slides. If you'd like to unmute and come on camera, then we can move through your deck. So welcome, Eric and Divya. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Eric Porse with the California Institute for Water Resources and UC-ANR, and joined by Divya Prakash. I'm going to give a short introduction and then turn it over to Divya, who's been the lead analyst for this work. So we'll be providing a short presentation to the panel on reported nitrogen application rates across farm sizes, and specifically analyzing some of the Irrigated Lands Program reporting data from the Central Coast. And this is work that we've been pulling together the data for a long period of time, but really just kind of undertook in response to a request for the panel. So some analysis that we did sort of on the fly. So next slide. So this is part of the Nitrogen and Irrigation Initiative which is a joint initiative of the California Department of Food and Agriculture, UC-ANR, and UC Davis. When I started my position with CIWR in 2023, this program was already in place, and so credit goes to Doug Parker, my predecessor, as well as Mark Cady at CDFA and Mark Lubell at UC Davis, who are the key personnel PIs who assembled the overall project. The overall idea of the NII, or concept of the NII, is to improve nitrogen irrigation management in California by closing the information access and training gap and evaluating program results. And the NII does a number of activities across a network of our cooperative extension advisors in the Central Coast and the Central Valley, including developing educational resources, implementing on-farm trials, conducting training events, and doing grower consultations. And a lot of the ideas that were pulled together as part of this broader program really came from work that our extension advisors had been doing for many years. And this is sort of a way to integrate it all into a single program that's led, especially in UC-ANR or spearheaded in UC-ANR by CIWR, as well as Kearney Research Extension Center. But as you can see, includes all of our cooperative extension advisors in the Central Valley and Central Coast. And then UC Davis leads the program evaluation component. So we want to make just to see the impacts of this work. And then CDFA is the lead. And it's funded through a series of grants, some from the Fertilizer Inspection Advisory Board, as well as Department of Food and Agriculture Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, as well as the Conservation Innovation Grant. And the Fertilizer Research Education Program at CDFA with Natalie Jacuzzi, Karen and Ahmad are key partners on this. Next slide. So we have, as part of this, an analysis team that included with the folks here. So myself, Rachel Schollebarger, who's a program manager with NII and CWR, as well as Divya, who you'll hear from in a minute. And in addition, we were also able to engage a couple of our ag economics experts, Mehdi Namadi and Ariel Dinar from UC Riverside. And so the NII began, and then about a year and a half ago, we started entering in a component to answer some unaddressed questions that we needed to get to around costs and benefits of these types of programs. And so we kind of brought in a larger data science approach. Next slide.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, and so I'll turn it over to Divya who will lead us through the analysis.
Yeah. So in question 8, the panel was asked whether existing data and scientific research are sufficient to conclude that small diverse farms operate in a fundamentally different way that results in reduced water quality impacts on per acre basis. And if so, what criteria might be used to identify such operation? Our contribution is not to answer this question definitively, but to assess what ILRP reporting data can tell us about nitrogen application pattern by farm size and crop diversity, which is a key input into the broader discussion. Next slide. So for this analysis, we are using ILRP data. The ILRP data is a grower reported data on nitrogen application and management practices. However, the structure of IRRP reporting differ by region. So in the Central Valley, IRP data are detailed at field and crop level, but they do not include information on total ranch acres. While in the Central Coast IRP data, it includes ranch level identifiers. So you get information about total ranch acreage, and you can link this acreage information to the field information within the same operation. So this allows us to construct the farm size measures and assess crop diversity at the growers level, which are necessary to understand the question number 8. So for that reason, the analysis focused on Central Coast ILRP data from 2017 to 2024, and it comprises more than 60,000 of field records. And use those data. We are using this data to evaluate how nitrogen application per acre varies by farm size and crop diversity. So the key measures which we are using are the nitrogen applied per crop acre, nitrogen applied per ranch acre, and farm size and crop diversity classification. For the analysis, we are using two different stages. First, we examine descriptive patterns, and then we move on to estimates using fixed effects model, which we will discuss in detail later. Next slide. So before moving on to discussion of results, it's important to clarify the two nitrogen metrics we use. Our first measure is nitrogen applied in pounds per crop acre is defined as total nitrogen applied divided by total cropped acres. So nitrogen applied per crop acre measures gives you the application intensity per cropping cycle. So in multi-cropping system, there will be a number of ranches for which cropped acres can exceed the total ranch acres. And the second measure is nitrogen applied per ranch acre, which aggregates total nitrogen applied all cropping cycle divided by total ranch acres. So because the denominator differs, the ranch acres value can appear higher than the crop acre values in multi-cropping system, even when based on same underlying nitrogen application. Next slide. Yeah, I think there is some animation. Yeah, thank you. So eh, let us discuss how we are defining like farm size. Since in the IRRP data, we do not have information, revenue information. So we had in consultation with farm advisors, and so we defined farm size using the total ranch acreage. We applied two complementary classification framework to assess whether observed nitrogen use pattern are sensitive to how we define small farm. So the first is three-tier framework, where which discriminates you are a small farm if your size is less than 25 acres, medium is 25 to 50 acres, and large farm is if you are more than 50 acres. And the second two-tier framework groups farms below and above 45 acres. And we are using these two methods to check the robustness to assess whether the pattern are sensitive to this broader size threshold. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we also define crop diversity. So to be consistent with the SWRCB's 2018 agriculture order, we reference crop diversity threshold in the context of reporting requirements for small and diverse growers, and in consultation with advisors. We measure crop diversities using two complementary indicators. The first one is the count-based measure, defined as the total number of crop types grown by a ranch within a reporting year. So farms growing 10 or more crop types are classified as diverse under this measure. And the second one is a density-based measure, like defined as the number of crops grown per acre. So farms exceeding zero point 0.5 crop per acre, which is equivalent to one crop per for every 2 acres, are classified as diverse, consistent with the threshold referenced in 2018 agriculture order. So using both method kind of allow us to distinguish between the breadth of farms crop mix and the intensity of diversification relative to the ranch area. Next slide. So now we look at the trend of the nitrogen application levels in the central coast. So we do observe average reported nitrogen application is around 178 pound per crop acre per year, and is relatively stable across reporting years. We do not see much variation. And when we look at the ranch acre basis, average reported nitrogen application is about 406 pounds per year, with values lower in recent year relative to the earlier years. So these two metrics kind of provide different perspective on nitrogen intensity versus cumulative ranch level application. Next slide. So now we are seeing the trend in the nitrogen application by farm size differences. So when we look at the two-tier size, the larger and the smaller farms, the difference between both are very modest at average. However, when we look at ranch acre units, the first one was at the crop acre unit, and the second one is at the ranch acre unit, then we do see that the larger farms are applying more nitrogen in compared to the smaller farms. So again, we do see like at the crop acre level there is very modest differences, but when we are looking at in the terms of ranch acre units, we do see there is significant difference. So this sort of kind of reflect the cumulative nature of the ranch acre metric and the role of a scale and the cropping intensity in shaping this aggregated nitrogen application. Next slide. So then we kind of looked at the nitrogen application trend by major crop categories. So if we see in this figure, there is a consistent pattern across most crops. There is a downward shift in application rate in most recent years, particularly in 2023 and 2024, relative to earlier period. I mean, this decline is evident for both. We look at leafy vegetables and high nitrogen using crops. This suggesting overall broad-based change rather than a crop-specific anomaly. So crops such as celery, cauliflowers, and broccoli consistently show higher application rate, while lettuce, spinach, strawberries remain lower, and wine grapes are substantially lower throughout the period. So overall, the figures suggest recent reduction in reported nitrogen application. So that reflects changes in application intensity within crops rather than a structural change in what crops are being grown. Next slide. Yeah. So in this slide, we will discuss the fixed effect regression results. All estimates shown here are from model that includes ranch, crop, and year fixed effect. So this means that we are comparing changes within same range and crop over time, holding constant time invariant range characteristics, systematic crop differences, and common year-to-year changes. So under this specification, we do see reported nitrogen applied per crop acre is higher for large farms in comparison to smaller farms. When we look at the three-tier model, farms which are larger, which is 50 acres or more, report about 22 pounds per crop acre per year more nitrogen applied in comparison to the farms which has less than 25 acres in size. Then we also look at the two-tier specification model. Then there also we see the farms which are larger, that is 45 or more, report about 17 pounds per crop acre per year more nitrogen than the farms which are smaller in size. And then we looked at the crop diversity. So we compare, we see how diverse farms in comparison between small farms, diverse versus non-diverse, we didn't find any significant result there. But within the large farms, higher crop diversity, we observed there, like those who are larger and diverse compared to those who are larger and non-diverse. The diverse one applies 45 pounds per crop acre less in comparison to the non-diverse farm. Next slide. Yeah. There will be some animation. Yeah, thank you. So this analysis was built on recently published, like peer-reviewed, and our extension work by our team examining nitrogen management practices and application rates in the Central Valley region. So we are currently also preparing a technical memo extending this analysis to both Central Valley and the Central Coast region, and examining the association between practice adoption and nitrogen application. We are also working with the NA contributor and collaborator like Molly Sears, Mark Rubel, Sat Darshan. We are also extending this work to conduct a benefit cost analysis of the nitrogen and irrigation initiative program. And we are happy to share this work with the panel with more robust calculation as needed in the future. I will stop here. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
So much for that, Divya, and Eric as well. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. I'm wondering if we can pause for just a few questions from panel members before we switch over to Joji's presentation. Any questions for Divya or Eric? Hannah, please.
Thank you so much, Eric and Divya. It's really awesome work. I'm looking forward to the publications that come out of it. Just because you had at the very last slide that this was work based on the Central Valley, were you assessing similar relationships in the Central Valley as the Central Coast, or do you have any findings from the Central Valley in regards to scale and diversification?
Yeah, so the choice of doing this work for only for the Central Coast region was because of the data, how data is structured. So in the Central Valley data, we are unable to link it with the ranch level identifier. So we do not have information of that, but the size of the ranch to classify it. uh, into different categories. So
Right.
that's why to do this sort of analysis, we have to move to Central Coast, which provides you more information where you can link information. There, the analysis is different. We are trying to understand the nitrogen management practices, how the relationship between the nitrogen application rate and different nitrogen management practices.
In the Central Valley, you mean?
Yes, in the Central.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Hannah, I would just quickly add that each of the data sets, when you look at it from a data comprehensiveness perspective, has different attributes to it that help you analyze different pieces. So there's a longer term record of data in many parts of the Central Valley that can help you link up practices with outcomes, and that gets to impacts. And then as Divya was saying, in the Central Coast, you have different data attributes that allow you to consider a little bit more about these scales of farms and some of the other questions.
Ruth?
Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting, and I think will be really valuable for the panel's discussions. I was wondering if you saw any differences, or did you do any analysis where you controlled for the crop type and then looked at diversified and, well, maybe not so much diversified, but farm size by crop, or was it all a big data set together?
So, like the idea behind the fixed cost was to do that sort of analysis where when you are applying this all crop fixed effect, range fixed effects, and all this, so you kind of looking at the same range. For the same range, you are seeing the difference within that range. So you're and also when you are applying this crop fixed effect, then within same sort of crop also you are seeing the variation. So that's model kind of take care of it, and that's why it kind of you get the result you are getting. It kind of uh, so it holds all these variation over time across same crop type and for the same range, and then you are getting this results which shows like there is kind of a relationship between application rate and size and the crop diversity.
Right. I was wondering, for example, if you looked at just spinach or just strawberries, are there different, I mean, are you able to pull that out and see the difference in application, right? Is it 22 pounds less? Is it 20, or, an average of 22 or 25? If you pull out one crop at a time, do you have those kinds of values?
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, but in the technical memo, we are doing it by the
Okay.
major crop types.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Right. Seeing no more hands, and in the interest of time, thank you again, Divya and Eric, for joining this afternoon. The slides, of course, for panel members will be available following the meeting. Really appreciate you joining tonight, though. At this point, let's go ahead and move on to a presentation from Joji Muramoto. And I understand, Joji, that you wanted to share from your end. Is that correct? Great.
Yes, please. Yeah. May I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Great. Let me see here. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joji Muramoto. I'm an associate professor of cooperative extension at UC Santa Cruz. First of all, thank you so much for your hard work, all the panel members, for this important task. It's a lot of work, I know, but you're doing great. And today I will discuss a practice to reduce nitrate leaching from agricultural fields using high carbon amendment. And I don't need to explain this figure showing nitrate contamination in groundwater to this audience, but there's a significant, not well documented nitrogen source that can cause nitrate contamination in groundwater, especially in coastal California, which is the autumn incorporation of nitrogen-rich residues of vegetable crops such as broccoli and cauliflower. The residue typically contain more than 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen, and we grow a lot of them in our state. Once residues are incorporated into the soil in the fall, soil microbes decompose them during a mild winter and eventually accumulate a significant amount of nitrate in the soil. A study showed that more than 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen can be lost below the root zone after 5 inches of rain. Cover cropping can scavenge some of the soil nitrate, but it is not widely adopted due to high land lease costs and conflict with spring planting. Studies in the EU and Canada have shown that the use of high carbon amendments immobilizes residual nitrate in soil and inspired us. As vegetable growers on the Central Coast apply compost in the fall, we thought that switching compost to a high carbon amendment can be done relatively easily if this approach works. So Richard Smith and I and some other researchers have been working on this approach since 2016. Just so you know, just to make sure we're on the same page, immobilization is the reverse biological process of mineralization. Mineralization converts organic nitrogen into inorganic nitrogen, and immobilization turns leaching susceptible nitrate into less susceptible organic nitrogen. And then mineralization takes place when the amendment has CN ratio of less than about 30, and immobilization when CN ratio of the organic amendment exceeds 30. And the interesting thing of this approach, kind of bonus, is the once immobilized organic nitrogen can be remineralized in a couple of months, especially in sandy to loamy soils, providing available nitrogen to the spring crop. So my goal today is to provide sufficient evidence to justify the inclusion of this approach in the statewide Ag Order, as Ag Order 4.0 did for the Central Coast. And here are the criteria for giving 30 pounds per acre credit in Ag Order 4.0. The organic amendment must have CN ratio larger than 30, and must be finely ground to less than 1/4 inches in diameter. It must be incorporated into the foot topsoil, and must be retained for a minimum of 3 months during the wet rainy season, and must have a minimum application rate of 5 tons per acre. If these criteria are met, growers can get a credit of 30 pounds per acre of nitrogen. At the end of my presentation, I propose a slightly modified set of criteria based on our research findings. So let's get started. First, I'm going to talk about a field trial examining the effect of ground almond shells and glycerol, a liquid high carbon amendment, tried in this trial. And we applied 5 or 10 tons per acre of ground almond shells or 2.5 tons acre of glycerol. This figure shows the soil nitrate dynamics in the top foot soil in the broccoli farro lettuce rotation. We began monitoring in October and continued until May of the next year. As you see here, this blue line shows the untreated control, and then the orange lines are almond shells, and then green and gray is actually a combination, but the green is the glycerol. And then let's see. The amendment was applied in the fall, and the broccoli was incorporated right before that. And then let's seeding, let's harvest, and then grow apply some nitrogen there. And this is a precipitation pattern. And then this is soil moisture changes and untreated control, but similar to other plots. The important thing is the first significant rain in January really increased the soil moisture. That kickstarts the biological activities for mineralization and immobilization. So until then was no rain, so it was pretty dry, and microbes are less active. And then next rain actually leached down all the nitrate, most of the topsoil, down to the lower soil horizon. And we took soil sample down to 3 feet, and then we made figures like this, 3D figure. This is the time, and this is the depth, 0 to 3 feet, and the amount of nitrate in the top in each foot. So the left side is untreated control, As you can see, February it has a high peak, as I showed in the previous chart, and then leach down until April as another rain fell. And on the other hand, ground almond shale plots has much less peak, lower peak here, reducing immobilizing nitrate. And the interesting thing is the higher peak in April when actually lettuce are growing. This is a kind of remineralization effect. This is a loamy soil, so that's we can clearly observe. And we tried to estimate how much nitrogen we lost during February and April from the amount of nitrate accumulated in the top 3 feet of soil. So in the peak time, February, untreated have more than 300 pounds of nitrogen in top 3 feet, and the ground almond shells and so forth has much less. And then by subtracting April's accumulation, we estimated nitrate leaching below the 3 feet. And untreated control lost almost 200 pounds of nitrogen below 3 feet, whereas almond shells and so forth was much less. And then almond shell 5 tons reduced more than 100 pounds of nitrogen leaching compared to untreated control. And or others also reduced more than 100 pounds of nitrogen leaching. And this figure summarized 7 field trials we conducted using almond shell 5 tons per acre. It's 2 rotation system, broccoli, farro, lettuce, like the data I just showed you. Also broccoli followed by strawberries in Gonzales and then Watsonville, Salinas area. And different year has different rainfall and different soil types. So the first trial year, 2017 and 18, we had 2 systems trial, different soil type, and then relatively dry winter. And then we ended up estimating more than 100 pounds of nitrate leaching reduction by applying almond shell 5 tons per acre. On the other hand, 2022 to 23 was very wet winter. In fact, our Gonzales field was flooded twice during this trial, and we have lots of rain and then lots of nitrogen loss, more than 300 pounds in Gonzales, and even strawberries more than 200 pounds. In that case, this approach didn't work well, just too much rain. Another case, this year is not so much rain, but it didn't work very well because the rain started early. Microbes need time to immobilize nitrate. So if rain comes very early, it might not work. And this is the same for cover crops, right? If the plant is too small, early rain can leach down nitrate anyway. So other 2 years, in strawberries, we estimated 55 and 65 pounds per acre of reduction, leaching reduction. So it's modest work. So in average, overall, of 7 trial, different years, 47 pounds per acre of nitrogen reduction. And we also examined the effect of particle size. Almond shell on ground were ½ inches or ¼ inches and 2 mil. Obviously, finer the particle, the more effective in terms of nitrogen immobilization. That this is a high immobilization rate. And then, but the ¼ inch is still like 80% of 2 mil very fine particles. But if you make it ½ inches, the effectiveness reduced to like half of 2 millimeter. So I think it's good to have less than ¼ inches particle size. And also CN ratio, we examine a different amendment with high CN rate, high carbon amendment, and this is the immobilization effect. And as you see here, almond shell, ground or unground, is relatively effective, and the olive pumice was effective too. But if you put the CN ratio on it, and CN ratio doesn't necessarily indicate the effectiveness of this approach. Like, compost CN ratio 20 was that kind of exceptional, but even higher CN ratio amendment doesn't work as well, as good as almond shell. That because CN ratio doesn't tend to take into account the quality of carbon compound in the amendment, just the ratio of total amount of carbon and nitrogen. So we went a step further to analyze what kind of carbon is in each amendment. And then here I compare almond shell and Pacheco triticale, that's known immobilizers. And the CN ratio is 40 to 60. And then lignin and lignin with ash content and cellulose and TNC, total non-structural carbohydrate content, which is the sum of the total glucose, free fructose, and free sucrose. So when you look at these things, it clearly shows something. Green waste, ground cover, rice hull, those things, although they have high CN ratio, it has very high lignin or very low total non-structural carbohydrate. So probably besides CN ratio, those kind of indicator needs to be added in the criteria. The limitation of this approach, if you apply too much high carbon amendment that can immobilize nitrogen, that can cause nitrogen deficiency for subsequent crop. But if you check the soil nitrate level, and if you notice something like that, you can add extra nitrogen fertilizer. Another issue is the cost of the amendment. Glycerol is clearly too expensive, and then the almond shell itself is very cheap, but the tracking from Central Valley to the Central Coast is costly. So giving credit in ag order can give incentive. It can incentivize growers to use this approach. And also to reduce the cost, we are currently doing study for using almond shell for dairy silage corn fields to reduce nitrate leaching in Central Valley. And but I understand that this water quality regulation for dairy silage field is under the different kind of law, if I understand correctly. So here's my slightly revised proposal for ag order for statewide ag order. Amendments must have CN ratio above 30 and probably total non-structural carbohydrates more than 5%. I just put that number in it, but future studies might fine-tune those numbers and compound. And the other part seems reasonable. And then 30 pounds per acre of nitrogen credit, based on our experience, seems very reasonable, conservatively reasonable. I'd like to thank for the fundings for this research project and collaborators, especially Richard Smith, Michael Kahn, Laura Totti, and Patricia Love at UC Cooperative Extension, and Daniel Geisler, and many others. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Definitely a whirlwind presentation there. I know that we're running a few minutes behind, but any questions from our panelists? Thomas, please.
I was wondering, Joji, great presentation. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the work, Joji, that you're doing there with your team. How do you think of that end that's in the almond shells and the end that these amendments are able to immobilize in the long run? When the grower does this year after year after year after year, puts 5 tons of almond shells on the field, 5 more tons in the following, how do we think about this in terms of nitrogen accounting? Is this just essentially increasing the soil organic matter, which Daniel mentioned this earlier today? That's the biggest nitrogen pool. And is that where it mostly goes? Is it going to increase atmospheric emissions, but not the leaching? How do we think about this? And when we had We had some really excellent presentations in the listening session, and I wanted to, since I didn't get a chance earlier, say thank you to all the speakers that spoke at the December 17th listening session, where again, there was a lot of input to these organic systems to make things work, but relative to what is being harvested. How should I think about that extra nitrogen in an organic system or with these high C/N amendments when things are done that way for a long period of time?
Great question. Richard, is that you are interested in answering the question, or raise your hand?
No, I was going to let you answer it. I had a question for you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that's a very good question, Thomas. I appreciate it. This is the well, just to answer your question exactly, we need to do long-term study, right? But that's still at this point we are lacking. And then we're just doing single-year studies. Even though that is a lot of work, but trying to estimate if this system can actually work for single application. So we definitely need more studies. But as I showed you a little bit, for fine particle ground almond shell, once immobilize it, but remineralize relatively quickly. So and then the thing is to kind of manipulate nitrogen release from broccoli or crop residue, rich nitrogen residue, not releasing nitrate during the winter time, but immobilize it and release in the springtime when plants can use. That's the whole point of this approach. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Richard.
Well, this kind of dovetails with what Thomas was just asking, because that remineralization that you showed, that happened in the subsequent cropping season.
Yeah.
And this is the exact kind of thing that we want. We want to transfer that nitrogen, from the fall, get it through the winter safely, with minimal nitrate leaching, and then you get it into the subsequent crop. And can you just talk a little bit, because you actually saw a yield response. Now, we never saw the yield response with lettuce. Maybe we didn't do big enough plots or whatever, but you did with strawberries, right, Joji?
Yeah, first year we found actually we didn't expect it, but applying almond shell increased the yield of strawberries in a very heavy soil. We don't know why. It could be just improvement of the physical structure. So, but as far as I can tell, all the 7 trials we monitor yield, all the trials, and then we didn't have significant reduction of yield using this approach so far.
Thank you.
Final questions for Joji. All right. Well, I know it's late. I really appreciate you providing that presentation today. Thanks so much. At this point, we are going to transition to public comment. I will note that we received 1 request for public comment in advance by David Wilcox. Before we go to Mr. Wilcox, just a quick reminder, the meeting notice and the agendas for these meetings ask that you submit requests for public comment in advance of each session. If you haven't had a chance to submit a response, we will provide a little bit of time for additional comment at the end. If you're interested in commenting as a member of the public, please use the hand raise feature. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. And we would ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. With that, we will go first to David Wilcox. David.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to make a comment. We had actually made plans to come to the January 14 meeting, and when it was shifted to a working session instead of a listening session, that's what resulted in my suggesting that we'd like to find a time to present to the panel a different set of solutions that are coming from a rather different point of view. Our chief scientist, Dr. David Bergvinson, presented on the August 14 meeting and very clearly stated that there are technology solutions that can enable you to reduce nitrogen significantly and increase yield in the same season that you make that reduction, and then make subsequent reductions with continued strong yields. So that is the basic message. It's based on a different set of assumptions. It does not assume the current crop growth system. And we've done a global search based on requests to look at Central California and try to solve the fact that there isn't enough water to grow food and drink. And as we progress through climate change, that's going to get increasingly worse. We spent a month working in the valley and quickly came to the conclusion that you couldn't solve the water and food problem in the Central Valley or for the crops it produces for the world if you continued to use the current crop growth system. So we have done a global search where we are not assuming that it is the correct system, and we are assuming it will need to be replaced. And that results of that search is what we'd like to share with the panel. It's a combination of 3 new systems, all of which very fortunately are already working in the valley. One on 60,000 acres and the others on 20,000 acres. But they could never scale rapidly enough to actually solve the water problem because they would need to be deployed on 1 to 2 million acres. And that won't happen in time to keep the valley, according to the state water plan, from going from 3.5 million acres to 2.5 million acres. And the growers we've talked to tell you that that will be devastating for the valley when that happens. So these new crop systems enable you to not do that. They allow you to increase the core food growing asset soil. That's the linchpin for all of the systems. And the soil growth results are nothing short of astounding when you put these together. And that kind of growth will, of course, use nitrogen and create carbon and create a positive yield. The typical yield results on these systems are 10 to 30% increase in the first season. And nitrogen, it'll take a while to reduce it, but you can start by dropping 25% right off the top. And then over 2 to 3 years, get down to 40 to 50% less nitrogen and less phosphorus. The other system, which is not the multi-material system that's doing what I just explained, is a sensor and auto irrigation system. And we're basically in the process of deploying these on additional acreage across the Central Valley with all 3 systems working together for the first time. So that's what we'd like to present to the panel. We feel like a solution like this that could actually change the game would be worth maybe 10 minutes and some Q&A afterwards. But that's our proposal. We made this to Dr. Harder and to Darren Polhemus after we spoke to them. And that was when we thought we were going to come and do that on January 14th. So we're looking for an opportunity to do that. Would love to do it in person, although I understand most of your meetings going forward are not going to be in-person meetings. So that's my purpose, is to request that opportunity to show an actual solution to reduce nitrogen, increase yield, and change the economics of growing in the valley.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Right. So a request for a presentation. We'll follow up with Chair Geisler and others on that. We have one other hand up from G. Ludwig. Please, if you could introduce yourself and provide your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Gabrielle Ludwig with the Almond Board of California. A couple of quick comments just on the conversation right now. Back to the question around number 9. I think this is where the working group ended up, but rather than worrying about specifying what should or shouldn't be exempted and or have an alternative way of reporting, really looking at what are some of the criteria from a scientific perspective that might be helpful to be considered in such evaluations. One thought just now, really appreciated Joji's presentation on organic matter inputs to try and hold on to nitrogen. I just wanted to give a heads up that the criteria he has works for the cropping systems he's working with. In almonds and other tree crops, we've been working with something called whole orchard recycling, and there you would not grind the tree down to such a fine level. But the research is showing that that helps reduce nitrate leaching as well. So just a heads up that as we move forward, in general, one of the big things that needs to happen is how do we better account for improvements in organic matter content in the soil from a water holding capacity and a nitrate leaching potential? And then conversely, how does that impact the nitrogen management for growers, which is a really still complicated question, but I think that's a key element that we've been talking around, and I'm sorry if this got discussed at the December 17th meeting, which I couldn't attend, but just wanted to emphasize that that is an area that figuring out how to include when growers do things like that into the modeling, both for the agronomic aspect as well as for the nitrate leaching aspect, is something that needs to continue to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional public comments? Again, please use the hand raise feature at the bottom of your screen. You can find that under the reactions button on your Zoom controls. All right. Well, I know we're a little bit over time here. Really appreciate everyone joining. Daniel, we'll work with you to just confirm the next steps and assignments for each one of the panelists moving forward. We'll get that out. We'll get a message out to all of the panelists very shortly. A quick reminder that as Mr. Wilcox mentioned, and we talked about a little bit throughout the meeting, the next meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday, January 14th. That meeting will be held in person at Cal EPA in Sacramento in the Coastal Hearing Room. There's also a Zoom link online for anyone who would like to join virtually. For more information, please go to the State Water Board's Ag Expert Panel website. You can just Google that if you don't have the link already, and it'll direct you right to the page. But thank you all so much for hanging on. Let me hand it over to Daniel for any closing remarks, and then Karen Mogus. Daniel.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank everybody for their contributions to the success of today's meetings, and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Likewise, thanks for the great discussion and the great presentations this evening, and for sticking it out through the evening. Appreciate it, and I'll see you all next week.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.